Hi guys, how are you? This is Amar, and I hope you're keeping well. Nobody's asking me if I'm keeping well. None of you are asking me, so I'm okay. So what we're gonna do today is instead of reading my own book, Happiness in Your Skin, which we are reading, which we'll continue to read and explain, I am gonna review a book today, which I read this year, which I believe is one of the most phenomenal books that I've read. It is also one of the most phenomenal life stories of anybody who's ever lived. This is the life story of a man called Hiro Onoda. I've been wanting to review this book for a while. I read this book like a couple of months back, and it's a story which everybody should know about. It's a story which there are a lot of lessons to learn from, and that is the book. I mean, the man wrote an autobiography. It's called No Surrender by Hiro Onoda. It's an expensive book. It's about $1,500, and I ordered it because I wanted to listen to the story from the horse's mouth. This man, uh, this man was born in Japan. He was a Japanese man, and he died in 2014 at the age of 91. He died at the age of 91, and he spent almost 30 years of his life on a jungle, fighting a war that was over in the first year, right? So he was posted in Philippines during the Japanese during the World War II. He was posted in Philippines during the World War II as a Japanese soldier, and that is 1944, and he fought for a year when the World War started. But the war got over in 1945, and he had been given instructions by his seniors to not surrender, that they would come to get him back. And he took those instructions to his heart, to his mind, and he took those instructions so seriously that he only left the jungle 30 years later when his senior, who had retired 29 years back after the World War is over and worked as a bookseller in Japan, came back to take him back. So it is an incredible story. It's also incredible because it is quite difficult to believe that a man can spend 30 years in a jungle without any supply of food, without any electricity, things we take for granted in the 21st century, internet, um, a roof over your head, food to eat, proper food to eat, because he was living in the jungle, so there was no proper food to eat. So what did he eat? How did he live those 30 years in the jungle? He had so let's read. So the way I'm going to go about it is that I'm going to read. So the way I read books is I I underline things that I like. I underline things that I like, and then whenever I have to read that book again. So these days, considering, I mean, I read very few books as a hard copy. Now this book wasn't really available as a Kindle copy, uh, so I read it as a hard copy. Otherwise, if I read Kindle books now, it's easier to go to your highlights than in a hard copy. But since I read this as a hard copy book, I will go through the things that I underline, and in the end, we'll summarize what have we learned from the story of Hiro Onoda. But the important thing that I want to say at the outset is that if a man can survive 30 years in a jungle without a roof on his head, without a supply of food, and he had to find all the food that he could eat from the jungle itself, whatever he could find in the jungle. I'll tell you what he ate. He has mentioned in the book how he ate and what he ate. Um, I mean, if a man can do that, then there's a lot that human spirit is capable of. If it only believes that it's fighting a battle that is worth fighting, right? So the story of Hiro Onoda, the reason I'm making this video, the reason I read this book, is to inspire you, to hopefully help you understand that your problems, your battles in life are probably not as difficult. Because if a man can spend 30 years in a jungle without a roof on his head, without a supply of food, without anything that civilization has to offer, absolutely cut off from the civilization, then you can really fight your battles as well, right? So let's go through the story of Hiro Onoda together, and I'm going to read some of the passages that he's written, some of the stuff that I write. Right. So this was from the foreword, right? The foreword said that Hiro Onoda was declared dead in Japan in 1959. The war got over in 1945, and he was declared dead in 1959. Right. So all those years, like 14 years, people believed that probably he would come back, but when he did not come back, they thought he was dead. So he was presumed to be dead. And at the time it was thought that he and his comrade Kinshiki Kozuka, which we'll talk about Kozuka later, had died of wounds sustained 5 years earlier in a skirmish with Philippine troops. Right, that's what they believe. So, but in 1972, Onoda and Kozuka surfaced. 1972, which is 27 years after the war was over. And Kozuka was killed in an encounter with the Philippines police. So in that, when Kozuka surfaced and he was killed in an encounter with the Philippines police, the Japanese again started to believe or wonder if Hiro Onoda was still alive. Right. So this is a foreword from Charles S. Terry. And we are not going to focus on the foreword. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on the book where Hiro Onoda himself is talking, right? So he actually came back on March 9, 1974, and he was sent to war in the summer of 1944. So it was exactly after almost 30 years of staying in the jungle that he actually came back. To civilization, back to Japan, right? So this is about his reunion. Just 2 days earlier, a message from Suzuki asking me to meet him here again had been left in the message box we had agreed on, and I had come. I was still afraid it might be a trap. He was always afraid all those 30 years that whatever people were coming to talk to him, it was all a trap by the Americans, because he believed he was always at war and the war was never over. I could tell from the voice that it was Major Taniguchi, who was his senior, who told him who told him not to surrender. It was Major Taniguchi, who had become a bookseller, came to fetch him. And it says, I could tell from the voice it was Major Taniguchi. Motionless, I waited for him to appear. Taut from my fingertips about our Lieutenant Onoda, sir, reporting for your orders. He was still the soldier that he was 30 years back, and he reported to his senior. When he reunited, he says, suddenly everything went black. A storm raged inside me. I felt like a fool for having been so tense and cautious on the way here. Worse than that, what had been doing all these years. Gradually the storm subsided, and the first time I really understood. My 30 years as a guerrilla fighter for the Japanese army were abruptly finished. This was the end. That was the reunion that happened 30 years later. And he's also asked himself, because he wondered later that he was wrong, and he asked, had the war really ended 30 years ago? If it had, what had Shimada and Kozuka died for? So his colleagues Shimada and Kozuka, who had been with him for most of the years in the jungle. Kozuka died 2 years before he actually found his freedom, and Shimada died a few years earlier than that. So he wondered if the war was over 30 years ago. As if it had, what had Shimada and Kozuka died for? They actually died fighting, or not even fighting. They died in skirmishes with the Philippines police, who had wandered into the jungle. So now he talks about his story, starting from commando training in Japan. So he was born in 1922. in Japan, in the town of Kainan, Wakayama Prefecture. Right, that's where he was born, and he grew up in Japan. And when I was 17, and I did not want to live off my parents anymore. So when he was 17, he actually started working in China. He went to China and found a job, and his elder brother, was already working in China, and he found a job there, and he started working somewhere in China, close to his elder brother. He also had company while he was in China. His first job was to create the branch account. So he was an accountant in China before the war broke. And about a year and a half of working in the office, I was made a buyer, and I was doing well in the job. At the age of 18 or 19, he was doing pretty well in the job, right? And then he was a smoker. He says, after I drank a little, I smoked about 20 cigarettes a day, and I played mahjong all night. Sometimes smokes 50 or more. So he was really enjoying himself, and he smoked, and he danced with the Chinese girls there. He was really having a fun time. On the 8th of December that year, the war between Japan and United States began. This was somewhere in the year 1944. This is the year 1942. Okay, where it says on that December, the war between. One day in May 1942, I was called up from army physical, which I passed immediately. That evening, I cabled my family in Wakayama, Class A Banzai. Right, he was assigned to the two. So he had to join the Japanese army because the war had started, and he was assigned to the 218 Infantry Regiment along with the other two inductees from my area. There was a celebration to mark our departure, and then we left. We had no idea where we were being sent. So that's how he was sent to Philippines, and he was ordered. This was the order that he received before he was sent to the jungle. You are hereby ordered to the 33rd Squadron in the eastern sector. Yeah, and the purpose of he was sent to a branch school before being sent to Philippines. The purpose of this branch school is to train you in a secret warfare. He was trained in secret warfare, which is guerrilla warfare, where fighters fight in the jungle as escaping in secret from people around there. For that reason, the real name of the school is to be kept absolutely secret. So I began to understand the basic differences between open warfare and secret warfare. So that's what he learned there. And he says the type of guerrilla warfare that we teach in the school is the same. There are no fixed rules. You do what's best suited to the time and the circumstances. General Hideki Tojo's instructions to the military said explicitly. These were the instructions which he took to his heart when he sent to the jungle. And the instructions were these. He who would not disgrace himself must be strong. He must always honor the family and his community. He must strive fervently to live up to the trust in him. Do not live in shame as a prisoner. Die and leave no ignominious crime behind you. So the idea was that if he were to be caught as a fighter, he should kill himself. So there was a knife that he kept with him. And in case he were to be caught, he was not to live in shame as a prisoner and die and leave no ignominious crime behind you. But at Futamata, we were taught that it is permissible to be taken as a prisoner. So these are two set of instructions that he received, right? And we'll quickly, what we'll do is we will go to the jungle, right? So he was sent to the jungle, and before he was sent to the jungle, they were greeted by Major Yoshimi Tanuguchi, who was his senior. And the major told him that I, together with 5 others, would be stationed in Sugi Brigade as the 8th Division from Hirosaki was in town. The 6 of us who were going to the Sugi Brigade left Manila with Major Taniguchi in a truck and also carrying a fairly large amount of ammunition. So the Major Taniguchi gave him these instructions. It won't be easy, but do the best you can. When you do something by yourself the first time, you're almost bound to slip up somewhere. So keep your eyes open. You're absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. That's what he was told. You're absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take, and these were the words that kept him in the jungle for those 30 years. You're absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, take 5, but whatever happens will come back for you. They said whatever happens will come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you continue to lead. You may have to live on coconuts. If that's the case, live on coconuts. Under no circumstances you give up your life voluntarily. So he was told to live on coconuts if he had to live on coconuts, and under no circumstances he was told to give up on his life or kill himself. Yeah, those are the instructions that he was given. So they went to Lubang, the island. The name of the island where he was stationed was called Lubang. It's called Lubang Island. When I went to Lubang, I went with orders to lead the men in guerrilla warfare, but not to command them. And he was told that whatever happens will come back for you. I had my orders and my equipment, and there was nothing to do now but to get on with it. I closed my eyes, and once again I heard the division commander's promise: whatever happens will come back for you. I mean, it's amazing at this point that when people say things, it's important that we do what we say, because this man stayed for 30 years in the jungle because his senior had told him that whatever happens, they'll come back for him. And his senior did not come back for him after the war was over. There were instructions that he was given, but they did not really come back for him. Just give me a second because we need to turn on the battery saver here. Yeah, how do you turn off the battery saver? Because otherwise the battery will die. And this is not a good idea because we are in the middle of the video, right? So okay, so one second. How do you do that? Yep. Okay, good. We are on, right? So that's how he was sent to Lubang, and now when we sent to Lubang, he had explosive on board. He would have sent a sky high in small. I cannot say, however, it's particularly stuffed. It is going to happen. It is going to happen. There's nothing I could do about it, right? So the war has started in Lubang, and the Japanese were fighting the war with the Americans. It's in fact Yugi Sen, which is a Japanese term for guerrilla warfare, was not very common at that time. There was no such thing as guerrilla boat. To put this interpretation on the word was nothing more than wishful thinking. These men did not want to wage guerrilla warfare. They wanted to get on Lubang because the Japanese wanted to get off Lubang because the war had moved somewhere else. So he was actually not even a senior lieutenant. He had gone there on probation while he was sent. They were sent there on probation. I had been told at division headquarters that unless received a word to the contrary, on that day I would become a full-fledged second lieutenant. No word came and assumed the commission had become official, but during the next 30 years I never once wore a full officer's uniform. Right. So this is the war in Lubang. There was a 4-day battle that went on with Americans, and taking 15 men with him, sent out to attack the enemy troops who were blocking us. The path along the airfield had been captured intact by the enemy. The pier had not been blown up. I had, in short, allowed the enemy to land without accomplishing either of the specific objectives that had been assigned by division headquarters. I had disgraced myself as a secret warfare agent because his colleagues had not listened to him when he went there, and he was not even a second lieutenant. He could not actually perform the orders that he had been given. So there was a serious element of gift. There was a serious element of guilt in his mind that he could not perform the orders that he had been given. So they looked at all of his colleagues there. A lot of his colleagues in Japan died during that period. The only men I was able to communicate with 10 members of the garrison unit, 4 members of the air intelligence squad, 4 members of the air maintenance crew, and 2 members of the navy squad. One day, Corporal Fujita picked up a Model 99 infantry rifle in the woods. I had earlier found a model, and I traded it to Fujita for Model 99 because I had about 300 cartridges. These are the stories here telling from the war while it was there. So the war got over, and after wandering around the foothills for around a week, living on potato vines and coconut milk, he recovered enough to make his way to where Shimada and I were. After that, the 3 of us were together. So there were 3 of them who were together: Kozuka, Shimada, and Onoda, right? And the war got over in July 1945. And he says this is where the story begins, where the war is over and he's still in the jungle, believing that the war is still on. So in the October of 1945, this is the first time I received some leaflets just saying that he should come out because the war is over. It was around the middle of October that I first saw one of the leaflets urging us to surrender. That was 1945. He stayed in jungle for 29 years more after the war was over. The war had ended on August 15. Come down to the mountain. That was the message that he received. The war had ended on August 15. Neither I nor the other believed it, because just a few days before, a group of Japanese who had gone to kill a cow had bumped into enemy patrol and had immediately been fired upon. How could that happen if the war was over? That's what he believed. My group of at least 10, at least was trying to stretch out his rice supply, and sometimes we were able to supplement the rice with bananas or meat. So for 29 years from here, he and his colleagues believed that the war was still on. They believed in a war that had ended on 15th August 1945. And he stayed in jungle till 1974. That's 29 years. I later found out only concluded the leaflet was phony. By the time I could only conclude, I later found out that this is simply a printer's error. So what he felt, there were some errors they found in the plea. We gathered together and considered whether the order of the printer were genuine. I had my doubts, and the sentence that those who surrendered would be given hygienic succor and hauled to Japan. And they found some mistakes in the leaflet and thought they were phony, but they were genuine. They were just some printing errors. So the war got over, right? And they spent time in jungle. So this is where he started talking about some of the food that he ate. We filled our diet with bananas and meat, and that's what you should have been doing. There were some of his colleagues left. He says, if you give me rice, you'll all be in trouble. You don't know how to conserve. After it occurred to me that my refusal to supply the others with rice might have been what caused them to surrender, as 41 of them, including, all did surrender. So after March, there were more and more leaflets urging us to surrender. There were more leaflets that were dropped in Japan, which urged them to surrender. There was another guy with them called Akatsu, and he was getting impatient. The three of us automatically looked at Akatsu, who said in a low voice, "I'll go on too, and that's what we're going to do." And the four of us vowed to each other to keep on fighting. It was early 1946. By the time we four made up the only Japanese resistance on Lulbang. At the time, Corporal Shimada, the oldest of us, was 31. Kozuka was 25. Akatsu was 23. On my last birthday, which was March 19, I had turned 24. He was 24 years of age, and he was 54 when he walked out of the jungle. Then he talks. Then the rest of the story is about how they spent time in Japan. He speaks about his colleague. Kozuka was even slighter build than I was, very reticent, and he had the highest rank in all the four colleagues who was there. Since I had the highest rank, I was officially the leader, but never once did I try to impose an order arbitrarily. It was all a cooperative effort. So let's talk. See what did they eat? So from now, they decided to share the food. Kozuka was very important to him. He trusted Kozuka. Kozuka was very important to me. I had not told him a special mission, but he seemed to sense something. I was very cooperative. He never complained, nor he did look very resentful. He was quick to make decisions. They were positive air about him, right? But he did have some fights with Shimada. So Akatsu left because he believed the war was over, and then only 3 of them were left. So after 10 months after Akatsu's departure, only a few days after the end of rainy season, we found a note saying, "When I surrendered, the Philippine troops greeted me as a friend." The note was written in Akatsu's hand. Shortly after, we spotted light craft circling slowly. So Akatsu said the Philippine troops addressed them as friends. So they wanted them to surrender also, but these 3 did not believe them. So Kozuka also mentioned they couldn't take us prisoner with a force of 50 or even 100 men. We know this island better than anyone else. So they started getting confident about the time they were spending in the island. They carried a food distribution map, which basically meant they knew where the food was. So this is where this thing, basically the food that they ate were cows, which is beef. So they killed the cows for beef, and they had fruits and coconuts. We carried a food distribution map of Lubang. From the weather and from experience, we could tell which part of the island we should go to find ripe bananas or relatively large number of cows. So they were eating bananas, and they were eating cows to survive in the jungle. It had been 6 years since I had seen electric lights, but the sight of them did not make me the slightest bit homesick. That surprised even me. I had even become so accustomed to not having lights at night. So they got so used to the darkness because it was a jungle. There were no lights, and he got so accustomed to the jungle life that even if there were some lights that came in from some celebrations on some flights on the top, it didn't bother him. In the rainy season, neither the search parties nor the islanders came to the mountains. We could relax and stay in one place. We built a little shelter with a roof made of palm leaves. Sometimes we would just sit there all day. Once in a while, Shimada would say softly, "I wonder if it was a boy or a girl," because Shimada was expecting a child when the war had started. When he had left home, he and his wife were expecting the second child. Sometimes they cut each other's hair with some little scissors I had improvised. So they had to cut each other's hair because you can't live with uncut hair. So they actually cut each other's hair. There were letters from Kazuka's and Shimada's families together with family photographs because people from Japan kept asking them to surrender, kept telling them the war was over, but they did not believe it, even after 8 years. After years and years, people came to talk to them. This was when Shimada died. A shot rang out in the valley and Shimada fell forward head first. He did not move. He was killed instantly. This is when the Philippines police had marched into the jungle. The newspaper also said what they had taken for a search party was a Philippine Army mountain unit practicing were attached on the huts. We always wondered why Shimada had remained standing without firing a shot. So Shimada died fighting what they thought was a search party, which wasn't a search party. Yeah. So stuff keep happening. People kept coming out to ask them to surrender, but they did not believe that anybody was actually saying the truth. At some point, his brother actually came to contact with him. And today all this sounds ridiculous, but I had been taught at Futamata always to be lookout for fake messages. It did not seem to me the attitude was overly cautious. One leaflet dropped contained a photo captioned Onoda-san's family. The picture showed my parents, my elder sister Chi and her children, my younger sister Kiko and several other members of the family. They sent pictures of his family to ask him to come back, but he believed everything was fake. We shifted to the area towards the south where we could not hear the loudspeakers, for which I found later the search party had escaped repeated over and over. Lieutenant Onoda, Private First Class Kozuka, we have come here from Japan to look out for you. The war has ended. Please talk with us. The search party went around the whole island camping out at night. Every time they came near us, we went farther in the jungle. They came to get him and they kept entering farther and farther in the jungle because he did not believe they were his people. He always believed that the war was over. War was on when the war was over. His brother also came to get him. When I returned to Japan, I learned that it had really been my brother, who he avoided when his brother came to get him. So 1959, he says, I'd been in Lubang for 15 years and how could I even dream that Japan cities had been leveled and Japan's ships had nearly been sunk or what had exhausted deleted Japan had indeed surrendered. As the details of the defeat such as invasion of